The morning of Maya's wedding arrived wrapped in gold. Sunlight spilled through the ivory curtains of the bridal suite at the Grandview Hotel, landing softly across the white satin of her dress where it hung against the wardrobe door like a promise. She had imagined this day 10,000 times. In the margins of notebooks, in the quiet spaces between sleep and waking, and now it was here, breathing and real and more beautiful than she had ever dared to hope. Her mother pinned the last curl into place and stepped back with wet eyes. Her two best friends, Priya and Serena, stood nearby pressing their lips together to keep from crying and ruining their makeup. The room smelled of roses and hairspray and something sweet from the pastry tray none of them had touched because they were all too nervous, too full of joy to eat. Daniel was waiting at the altar when she came through the doors, and the look on his face, that completely unguarded, overwhelmed look, made every year of patience worth it. He mouthed the words, "You're beautiful," and she felt her heart expand beyond any reasonable size. The ceremony was simple and honest, the way they had both wanted. No choreographed entrances, no fog machines, no overwrought string arrangements, just vows spoken in trembling voices and a room full of people who genuinely loved them. Even that felt like a small miracle, but Vivian Hargrove, Daniel's mother, had been a shadow at the edge of everything from the moment she arrived. She greeted Maya with a smile that never quite reached the bone, the kind of smile that is more architecture than feeling, built carefully to serve a function. She kissed both of Maya's cheeks and said, "You look lovely," dear in the tone a woman uses when she means something slightly different. Maya had noticed it before. In the months of engagement, the way Vivian's warmth always had a slight current of cold beneath it, like a river with a hidden undertow. At the reception, when the first glasses of champagne were poured and lifted, and the room shimmered with laughter and clinking crystal, Maya brought her flute to her lips and paused for just half a second. Something about the color was slightly off, not dramatically, just a faint cloudiness near the bottom. Barely worth a second glance. She told herself it was the light. She told herself it was nothing. She drank. The investigation, if Maya could call it that, began not with confrontation but with stillness. She had learned early in life that the most dangerous thing a woman could do was show her hand too soon. Her grandmother had told her once, sitting on a wooden porch in the long amber light of evening, that patience was not the same as weakness. Patience was a blade you kept hidden until the moment it mattered most. Maya had never understood that fully until now. She started with Vivian's closest friend, a soft-spoken woman named Carolyn who had known the Hargrove family for 30 years and who had a habit of saying more than she intended after her second glass of Merlot. Maya invited her to lunch under the pretense of thanking her for attending the wedding. She listened far more than she spoke. She asked gentle questions about Daniel's childhood, about Vivian's hopes for him, about the years before Maya had entered the picture. Carolyn, flattered by the attention and loosened by the wine, began to talk. There had been another woman. Her name was Isabel, the daughter of a man named Gerald Fitch, who had been Vivian's closest business connection for over a decade. The two families had an understanding, Carolyn said carefully, then immediately looked as though she wished she hadn't. A social understanding. An arrangement that had never been spoken aloud, but had been assumed by everyone in Vivian's circle for years. When Daniel had brought Maya home, a school teacher from a modest background with no family connections and no inherited wealth, Vivian had smiled and said all the right things and begun, quietly and methodically, to dismantle her. The champagne was only the most recent weapon in a longer war. A sympathetic sister-in-law, Daniel's younger sister Bree, handed Maya an old diary entry without a word of explanation one afternoon, just pressed it into her palm in the hallway outside Vivian's kitchen and walked away. The entry, dated 18 months ago, described Maya in terms so cold and calculating they barely seemed human, an obstacle, an inconvenience, a temporary problem. The final confirmation came from Vivienne herself in a heated argument during a Sunday dinner when her composure cracked just far enough. She said, with quiet and devastating clarity, that she had only ever wanted what was best for her son. Maya smiled and said she understood completely. She was already planning the toast. Vivienne herself had suggested the anniversary dinner. That was the detail Maya savored most in the weeks of quiet preparation that followed, the exquisite irony that the woman who had tried to unravel her had handed her the perfect stage on which to finish everything. Vivienne had framed it as a peace offering, a gesture of warmth, a family gathering to celebrate 1 full year of her son's marriage. She had booked a private dining room at Marcello's, the most expensive restaurant in the city, and invited 14 of her closest friends and family members alongside Daniel and Maya. She wanted witnesses. She always wanted witnesses. It was how Vivian operated. Everything performed before an audience. Every kindness calculated for maximum visibility. Maya had accepted with a gracious smile and spent the following 3 weeks preparing with the kind of focused calm that only comes to a person who has already grieved and passed through the other side of their anger into something quieter and more precise. She had researched the sedative in the lab report thoroughly. The same compound was available in a mild over, the counter sleep aid, entirely legal. Entirely harmless in a small dose, producing nothing more dramatic than a heavy drowsiness and a gentle confusion within 30 to 40 minutes. Not dangerous, not cruel, just enough. Just a mirror held up to a woman who had never once been made to see her own reflection honestly. On the evening of the dinner, Maya arrived early. She knew Marcelo's well. She had taught the restaurant manager's daughter for 2 years, and he owed her a kindness, which she called in quietly and without drama. She knew which seat Vivienne would take. She knew which glass would be set before her. The rest required only a steady hand and 30 seconds of privacy, both of which she had. The dinner began beautifully. Vivienne was luminous in burgundy silk, holding court at the head of the table, her laughter arriving precisely on cue, her compliments distributed with surgical generosity. She toasted Daniel and Maya with warm and well-crafted words that made 2 of the older guests press handkerchiefs to their eyes. Then, 40 minutes in, the luminosity began to dim. Vivienne's words started arriving slightly behind her thoughts. Her head tilted at a familiar angle. Her smile lost its architecture. Around the table, guests exchanged glances, small, uncertain, questioning glances that Vivienne, in her fog, could not intercept and redirect as she normally would. Maya reached across and gently touched her mother-in-law's hand. "Are you all right, Vivienne?" she asked softly, with the whole table listening. "You seem a little unsteady. I hope you haven't had too much to drink." The words landed in the silence like a stone into still water, and the ripples moved outward slowly, reaching every face at the table. Carolyn's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Bree pressed her lips together and looked at the tablecloth. Daniel, who knew everything by now and had chosen with quiet fury to stand beside his wife, lifted his glass and said nothing. Vivian looked at Maya across the candlelight with eyes that were clouded and slow, but not yet entirely without understanding. In them, behind the sedative fog, something sharp and horrified flickered, the dawning recognition of exactly what had been done and exactly how completely she had been outmaneuvered by the woman she had once dismissed as a temporary problem. Maya held her gaze with perfect steadiness and smiled, not with cruelty, not with triumph, but with the calm of a woman who had carried a wound in silence for a full year and had finally, quietly, set it down. She leaned close and spoke just below the threshold of the table's hearing, her voice as soft and even as still water. "Now, you know," Maya said, "exactly how I felt." She straightened, lifted her own glass, and turned to the table with warmth and grace, steering the conversation forward as Vivienne sat silent and diminished beside her, the grandest woman in the room, reduced, for one evening, to the smallest. It was not a destruction. Maya had never wanted destruction. She had wanted only the one thing Vivienne had always denied her. To be seen clearly, to have the truth acknowledged, to stand in her own life without someone else's hand reaching invisibly to pull her down. She had that now, outside after the dinner. Standing in the cold night air while Daniel brought the car around, Maya tilted her face up toward the sky and breathed. The stars were sharp and clear above the city. She felt, for the first time since her wedding night, entirely and completely herself, unhaunted, undiminished, whole. Some victories make no sound at all. They simply settle into the bones like warmth, like the ending of a long winter, like coming home to a house with every light already on.